Hi, everybody. This is the Planet Cambo podcast. It's John here. Today, we've got a very special guest. This is Caitlin Thompson, who is a Cambo practitioner and researcher in the field of Cambo. Welcome, Caitlin. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, John, for inviting me. Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no worries. So I think it would be good just to start with, if you can give the listeners just a background, a bit of background about you if they've not heard of you.
Yeah, sure. Cambo is very near and dear to my heart personally. I used to really suffer from a lot of chronic illness symptoms and diagnoses that encompassed things like Lyme disease, PTSD, food allergies, central nervous system infections, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, etc. And so this medicine was really fundamental in my own personal recovery from a chronic illness. And since then, I've developed an expertise around helping people with Lyme disease and autoimmune related conditions. And luckily, I also have a formal scientific education in neurobiology and a passion for science. So I've been able to combine my own personal journey with healing with Cambo with my love for science. And so right now I'm focusing a lot on trying to pioneer the research in this field because it's pretty neglected and there is so much room to discover so much about what the potential of Cambo holds.
Absolutely. And, I've spoken with Caitlin before, and we both agree that the current state of the research that's gone into Cambo is really poor, actually, compared to what it should be. And Caitlin's leading the way to change that. So on today's podcast, I have a whole load of questions for Caitlin, some things that I really want to know the answer to. Some of these questions I think I know the answer to. It's what I've been told or what I've read, but actually I'd really like to hear it from somebody that actually really knows and can explain the whys and the how behind. So we'll go straight into it. And the first question, this is about how Cambo affects consciousness. So I'm going to read you this this quote. And if you could just comment on it. A study published in 2020 demonstrates with standardized questionnaire data that the acute effects of Cambo are not reported to include effects on consciousness comparable to serotonergic psychedelics, especially no comparable effects are reported on perception and thinking. So this is just about how Cambo affects the brain in comparison to more powerful psychedelic medicines.
Yeah, I think it's really important that they issued these surveys in this study. So they administered the mystical experience questionnaire and the altered states of consciousness questionnaire, which are surveys that we're also going to be using in some of our studies moving forward to basically evaluate if Cambo does cause a psychoactive experience. And I know that there's, likely concerns from legal authorities on whether this substance is psychoactive or considered a narcotic substance. And as Cambo practitioners and Cambo participants, we know that the experience really doesn't fit into the category of a hallucinogenic or really altering experience. People are quite present and cognizant during the experience. They're able to safely maneuver and make decisions and drive themselves home without being inebriated. And so studies like this and the ones that we're working on are important for really providing concrete data to show that this isn't a substance that we should be concerned about causing psychedelic or hallucinogenic altered states of consciousness that may, change the legal status of it.
Okay. I absolutely agree with you that Cambo is in no way anything like a true psychedelic experience, and it shouldn't be classed as such.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that if we're gonna start being real picky about what psychoactive means, then we
Mm.
should ban chocolate, because chocolate and coffee are at least, if not more, psychoactive than Cambo is. So it's just a matter of what are we using to define what psychoactive means, and if we're using the behavioral and cognitive changes that we observe with other drugs like hallucinogens or narcotics, Cambo just simply does not operate anywhere near the same sort of psychological changes that we see with those substances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Um, Next question. So, although the pharmacodynamics of the Cambo secretion have only been partially investigated, it's been suggested that Cambo's pharmacological effects are restricted to the cardiovascular, gastroenterological, endocrine, and immune system, the automatic nervous system, and the endogenous opioid system. On one hand, this appears to be plausible given the compound's peptide structure, which prevents them from passing the blood-brain barrier. On the other hand, the authors hypothesize that the neuropeptide opioids in Cambo, that's dimorphin and ditorphin, could be responsible for the observed alterations of consciousness, suggesting psychoactive effects. However, given the neuropeptide structure, these opioids have been reported to be centrally active via intrathecal application only. So what that's saying is that these two peptides, it's been reported they're only centrally active when they're injected, as opposed to going through the skin as Cambo is applied.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that's why we need research, because we really don't know where these peptides are ending up or how they're interacting in these complex cocktails interacting with other peptides as well. And there are rumors that are quite widespread that some of the peptides in Cambo alter the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, but these are only rumors. And even though this is accepted as fact by the Cambo community, it's really not substantiated with any scientific evidence. This assumption is only because peptides that are similar in structure, that are in the bradykinin and tachykinin peptide families, sometimes have the ability to alter vascular permeability, aka they can change things like the blood-brain barrier membrane and whether things can go in and out. But we don't know that this is happening for sure in the transdermal superficial burn method that people are typically receiving Cambo. And therefore, we can't assume that these opioid peptides are getting straight to the brain. We really can't assume anything at this point. And that's why the jury is completely out until we do proper research. And I always say innocent until proven guilty.
Right. Yeah. I mean, going on what I'd been taught and what I'd read, is that Cambo does cross the blood-brain barrier. It acts directly on the brain. And then, more recently, I've realized that it's not been proven at all. And I guess we just don't know.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time digging in the scientific literature, trying to figure out where that statement came from. And it's possible that it's buried deep somewhere where I couldn't find it, but I spent hours and hours trying to find anything that said that phylokinin or phylomedusin changed the blood-brain barrier permeability, and I just wasn't able to find any bit of evidence that anyone had ever investigated that.
Mm, okay. Okay. I mean, that brings me on to the next question, which was, does it cross the blood-brain barrier? But I guess we've kind of answered that.
Maybe.
But
I mean,
yeah,
the answer is maybe.
yeah. But the thing is, so I mean, I'm being a more of a layman. If Cambo doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, like, my understanding of how Cambo works is you have the peptides and the neuropeptides, and in the brain you have receptors, and the peptides are like keys, the receptors are like locks, and they fit together. If Cambo doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, is that still possible? Does something need to cross the blood-brain barrier in order to actually get to the brain?
Not
Do you see what I'm getting
necessarily.
at? Okay.
I mean, it might not be getting directly to the brain to hit receptors, but your body is full of nerves and neurons, like especially your gut. Your intestines are basically completely innervated with neural tissue and acts as like a nervous system on its own. It's called the enteric nervous system. And there's as many neurons in your gut as there are in your spinal cord. So for
Wow.
perspective, so you bet you that the nervous system tissue that's in your intestines, that's going to your heart, to your lungs, to your kidneys, to all these other organs, your muscles, they have receptors for serotonin. They have receptors for acetylcholine. They have receptors for opioids. So just because the peptides are binding to opioid receptors elsewhere in the body, but not directly to the brain, it doesn't mean that there isn't some sort of benefit to the brain, but these are usually going to be downstream, like chemical cascades that happen through highly sophisticated modulation and feedback loops that our biology has. And so for this reason, I don't think we can expect these peptides to be hitting the brain directly like maybe an opiate drug would.
I see. I see. So it's more of an indirect effect on the brain, and we've got
It,
receptors all over our body. I see. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. No,
absolutely.
that's something I wasn't aware of. You know, from the what I was taught and the literature and what's available, it just, to me, it was like, okay, the Cambo enters the body through the lymphatic system, which is something else I'm going to ask you about in another question. And then, you know, it goes directly to the brain. It kind of pushes buttons in the brain and makes the process happen. But actually, it's a lot more complex than that, it seems.
Yeah, you know, you asked earlier that about the gastrointestinal effects and the
Mm.
cardiovascular effects and the endocrine effects. And I kind of giggled because you said, oh, Cambo is exclusively affecting all these systems. And I'm thinking, well, those are all the core systems that affect everything else in the body. Like endocrine system is our hormones, our digestive, our gastrointestinal system has a very direct relationship to our brain function and hormone secretion and all sorts of things. So actually you're kind of at the precipice of like being able to influence every biological system in the human body by targeting the cardiovascular, the gastrointestinal, and the endocrine system, along with the nervous system. Even if you're not hitting the brain directly, something's going to be happening to the brain downstream just because they're all interrelated.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Next question, and I know the answer to this, or I think I know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear it from you. Is Cambo a poison? Is the body being poisoned in any way when Cambo is applied topically? So I'll just say, I always tell people it's not a poison, even though the substance itself might be poisonous. When it goes on the skin, it's not poisoning you in the same way as if you were to eat it. But I'd like to hear it from a from the science point of view.
Yeah. So I also really kind of dove down the rabbit hole
Mm.
in understanding what the definition of a poison is. So it's somewhat vague, but actually, a poison is usually some sort of defensive biological product that deters something from being killed or eaten by predators, and usually in a passive way. So for example, with frogs, they're trying not to get eaten, versus a venom is usually injected by some sort of specialized organ like a fang from a snake, and that's usually in a more offensive, like attacking, active administration. And so this was what I discovered when I was trying to understand, what does poison mean, and does poison necessarily mean toxic? And then I went and tried to figure out what toxin is. So by the definition of like, when we're talking about organisms and their defensive secretions, technically we could call Cambo poison. However, when we're considering something that might be toxic on a cellular level, all the peptides that have been explored thus far have a remarkable safety profile when tested against animal cells and animal, like in vivo experiments with live animals. And there's amazing tolerance to these peptides, even though they might actually be very active against organisms like bacteria or viruses or fungi or protozoa. They seem to be pretty benign in the way that they interact with animal cells. And part of this has something to do with when some of these peptides come into contact with a bacterial cell wall, they just absolutely decimate it and destroy it on contact. And this isn't happening with animal cells because of the presence of cholesterol in the cell membrane. So it's still kind of out for debate, but in summary, there seems to be specific toxicity of the peptides towards lower organisms like bacteria, fungus, viruses, protozoa, things like that, but not animals.
I see. So I thought it also protected it from predators, the frog. I thought it was like poisonous in that the frog is brightly coloured for one, which is a deterrent, but also the secretion was actually poisonous, which would stop a predator from eating it.
Yeah, stopping a predator from eating it is different than killing a predator. So,
Ah,
for
okay.
example, some of the opioid peptides can activate either directly or indirectly, we don't know. They can activate the parasympathetic nervous system response, which is like the relaxation and rest and digest response. And sometimes you'll see people yawn a lot during their sessions, and so some frogs that have similar peptides, I don't know if this is confirmed with the Kembo frog, but part of their defense strategy is they have all these peptides that cause the snake to yawn and like uncontrollably. And so
Ah,
a frog that is halfway down a snake's throat, if the snake is yawning, the frog can just kind of excuse itself and be like, okay, I'm just going to crawl out of your mouth now. So it's actually a very polite and sweet way of avoiding being eaten. So we don't know that predators are actually dying from consuming the Cambo frogs. For all we know, they could just be very adverse to the effects of it and then learn never to try to eat one of those frogs again.
I see. So it's not like Cambo is a poisonous substance, but it has these amazing peptides in it, and we want to, you know, use these peptides. Therefore, we need to put it on our skin and not eat it, because if we eat it, it's poison. But if it goes on our skin, it's not poison. What you're saying is that actually, all that makes up Cambo is the peptides. There's nothing else about it. There's just peptides there, and to some um, well, like antimicrobial, so it kills fungus. It's poisonous to fungus. It's poisonous to bacteria. But you're saying to animals, it's not poisonous, but it might serve a different purpose. In that, like you said, it gets a snake tries to eat the frog, and it starts yawning and the mouth opens. But it's not actually. There's nothing about Cambo that's poisonous to an animal, as in it would
Um,
kill it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the animal. So one thing
Mm.
that is important to consider is that with venoms and poisons and toxins of spiders, snails, snakes, whatever, the toxicity from one animal to another is very different. So, like a rattlesnake might be poisonous to certain rats or frogs or whatever, but there might be some squirrel species that has evolved tolerance and doesn't die when it gets bitten. So it's important to consider that Cambo and its peptides don't appear to have toxic effects that we know of to humans. Again, I'm not really sure if you were to test this on different animals, what the effects would be. But so far in the literature, in the science, with guinea pigs, with dogs, with rats, with rabbits, we haven't observed any toxic effects so far of any of these peptides, even in high doses.
Okay, that's very interesting, because I was always under the impression that, like, for example, if you're doing Cambo treatment for somebody and there's dogs around, you have to be very careful. You don't want Cambo points floating around the floor because the dog might eat them. Um,
Right. I mean, but like I said, the research is on one peptide at a time. So
I see.
maybe, and it's animals being injected.
Mm.
So We just can't draw conclusions on what happens with Cambo, a complex cocktail of peptides that is, administered through the skin, versus what one study 20 years ago said about guinea pigs that were injected with one peptide. Um, they're not equal to each other. And again, I'm just trying to emphasize the importance of doing research before we can draw any conclusions whatsoever.
I see. So again, it's we don't really know. It's just people assume a certain thing.
Yep. Yeah.
So I mean, again, what we don't know what would happen if you ate Cambo, if a human being swallowed Cambo, we don't know what would happen.
I've heard some stories of people doing it. I don't know anyone personally that's done it. And I've heard that they were very ill for weeks.
Yeah, I heard
And
that.
I've also heard of people getting something called frog sickness if you take it orally or even intranasally. And, I've heard that that could be due to parasites that are in the secretion that don't get let in through the skin and through the lymphatic system, but then they do get in if you take it orally. But again, this is like completely unsubstantiated. I don't have any idea where this information comes from. There's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of misinformation in general in this community, and I just don't trust any of it anymore.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Just not, the answer is we don't know. Yeah. So you mentioned about it being used in different ways, and that's something else that has just come to mind. Is I've heard of, well, if it needs to go, it goes on the skin, you have to burn the skin. So we think, is there another way we could take Cambo that doesn't involve burning of the skin, such as, inside the nose? Could you put Cambo inside your nose, and could it be absorbed through that, or maybe through the gums? Is that something else? I mean, because I know this is another thing as well, is that I've heard that people give it to dogs. It can be given to dogs, and the way they give it to a dog is they put a small point up its backside, right? So
Yeah.
again, is that something that could be done either, in the rectum or in the nose or through the mucous membrane of the mouth? Are these viable options for receiving Cambo?
Possibly and likely. I do have some experience working on animals, specifically dogs and a donkey. The donkey I administered through just like the gums, so sort of sublingually. And there were effects, but they were quite different than you would expect. Also, donkeys and horses can't vomit. With the dog, I've administered rectally, and it was remarkably very similar to a human experience of doing the burns. I do know of one practitioner who does like cambocolonics or like enemas, and so she is administering rectally to humans. I haven't gotten a chance to really ask her a lot about that, but yeah, I think there's an imperfectness to burning people. The size of the burns are not standardized, and that's really what dictates how much of the medicine gets in the system. And also, it's not sterile, and people can get infections, and it sucks to burn people. And so I do think we are going to end up sort of moving towards a more innovative way of administering the peptides. I think that's the natural course of the development of Cambo and Cambo inspired medicines. But yeah, we're the guinea pigs. We're all experimenting, and those of us who are brave enough are trying some weird shit, and not without
Mm,
risk, because we just don't know. We're really pioneering this medicine in the modern world with these different ways of using it that have never been seen before.
I see. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so really, we're right at the beginning. Even though Cambo's been used for centuries by the indigenous, we're really right at the beginning in terms of understanding it. Okay. Next question. Does Cambo enter the body through the lymphatic system? This is another question where I assume the answer is yes. Has this been proven?
Literally nothing has been proven with Cambo,
Okay.
because none of the research that exists on any of these peptides has ever been exploring the transdermal burning application. Therefore, we have no idea. I don't know enough about the lymphatic system myself to really comment on the mechanism of how it would get absorbed, but it obviously gets into the bloodstream and gets distributed throughout the body very rapidly because, you know, how else would you have something go from your arm or your leg to feeling your heart beat differently right away? But you know, maybe I sound like a broken record. We just don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, this is really interesting because, you know, we teach Cambo courses and I teach these things, and a lot of the things that I'm teaching as fact actually is, you know, it's more we don't know. So the lymphatic system is just, it's an assumption. Someone just set it a theory that it seems like it would go through the lymphatic system, and that's as far as it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, I think most things are speculative at best that we have accepted as truth in the Cambo community.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, next question. In my experience, people who do Cambo regularly, very rarely, if ever, get ill. What's the mechanism for the immune system boost? So me personally, I mean, I've been doing Cambo for what, 10 years. I never get sick. Colds and flus, I used to get them like everybody else. They just stopped happening. And I don't have a clear idea of why that is. Is there one peptide that does that, or is it all of the peptides?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the different peptides. So there, in my opinion, and this is of course speculative still,
Mm.
there's direct and indirect effects. So there's a bunch of different varieties of dermorphin, or dermaceptins, which are the most potent that we know of antimicrobial peptides found in the secretion. And so there's about 9 different dermaceptins and then a couple of other dermaceptin-like compounds. And they are particularly potent for eradicating on contact the different viruses, bacteria, fungus, whatever. And so there may be these systemic antimicrobial effects that I think can help when somebody has chronic infections that have inhabited tissues that are really not supposed to have so many bacteria hanging out with them. Um, and I think there are downstream effects from modulation of the nervous system, which will then affect immune modulation as well. So, one example of this is when you have effects on the central nervous system or the endocrine system, which also will tie in with the nervous system, then you have influential results on the vagal nerve tone, which also can affect the gastrointestinal function of a person and the whole gut brain connection. And what that means is that changing what you'd call vagal nerve tone, which is basically the body's ability to gracefully go in between like a stress response and a relaxation response. The more vagal nerve tone that you have, the better immune modulation that you're going to have. So we know that opioid activity in the nervous system, including the peripheral nervous system, so not necessarily the brain, but even the stuff on the outside of the skull, it can change things like T cell production, which is a type of immune cell that can go after pathogens. So I think personally that there are direct antibacterial effects from some of the peptides and indirect immune modulating and immune boosting effects from some of the more neurologically or endocrine active peptides.
I see. Okay, so it's a combination of things. It's not one particular thing that will be doing that. It's a combination.
In my
Yeah.
opinion, just based on my understanding of the peptides and my experience as a practitioner.
Okay. Okay. And when you mentioned there the dermaceptins, and this is something that I read in one of your papers, is that Cambo works differently in vitro to in vivo, or in layman's terms, in a test tube to actually inside the body. So, for example, where the effects on the vascular system, the gastrointestinal system, those are effects that of Cambo actually inside the body. But where it's antimicrobial, that's actually more on the surface of the skin, protecting the frog's skin. Is that right? So, for example, the anti-cancer effects or the effects of dermoceptin is more on the surface or in a test tube than it is inside the body.
Maybe. I mean, again,
Okay.
we don't know.
Mm.
And in research in general, that's like a challenge that we have to always deal with, is that what we see happening in a petri dish with cells is not necessarily equal to what's happening in the body, which is a very complex interactive system. Um, and yeah, we don't know if the quantity of the peptides, once they're in circulation, we don't know how many are actually getting into the
Mm.
body versus just sitting on top of the burn. We don't know how many of the peptides are actually getting absorbed into various tissues. So
Yeah. It's the same. I totally get. No, no, I totally understand. We don't know, because it's like I was trying to get my head around it. If somebody said to me, I don't know, I have a fungal infection, right? Whatever it is, athlete's foot or something like that. And if I take Cambo, is it going to help? And then I started thinking, well, hang on a minute, maybe actually it might be better if they actually put Cambo on their toe rather than into their body. Do you know what I mean? Like, because if it's an
yeah,
antifungal
for
effect, they're actually
sure.
topical. And this is something I tried actually, right? I get a cold sore comes up every, a couple of times a year. When I'm really run down and tired, I get a cold sore.
Sure.
And I tried putting Cambo actually on my lip, actually here on the cold sore, to see if it would do anything. I can't say it made any difference. It definitely stung when I put it on there. But
Uh-huh.
I thought it's if Cambo is antiviral, maybe the antiviral effect is not inside the body. It's only going to be on the surface. So I thought, okay, well, let's try putting it on my lip. I mean, this is not a scientific experiment I did. What I'd need to do is actually realize how long does it take for a cold sore to normally heal, and then to do an experiment where I put the Cambo on and I see how long it takes, because I didn't do it like that. So I can't give you
Sure.
a definite answer, but that was something that occurred to me, that actually maybe Cambo could be used topically for skin issues as opposed to going inside the body.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that could be explored. If people do have like skin infections or viral expressions or whatever. But yeah, I think you're very brave for trying it. I'm curious, did you get any of the cardiovascular effects? Like, did you feel any of the peptides went in? No,
No,
it was
no, no,
just
not nothing at all. It stung a little bit when I put it on,
uh-huh,
and then I just left it on, let it dry for whatever 20 minutes, and then nothing. So
uh-huh.
no, but this was on the surface of the lip. This wasn't inside the mouth, so it was
Right,
just
right,
here.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I was just
So yeah,
curious if it would go into like, partially
yeah.
open sore or
It
whatever, but
no, as far as I was aware, I didn't notice anything. No, didn't get the initial effects of Cambo or anything like that. So
yeah.
um,
Well, and like I said, it's possible that actually the immune boosting effects are um from way more complex downstream events than the actual minuscule amount of peptides that are in circulation in the body. Um, the disinfectant qualities of it might not be as strong as we imagine them to be.
yeah, okay. Because that's it. There's a lot of, when you read online, there's a lot of claims, or not claims, but a lot of comments about Cambo, about it being, antifungal, antiviral, and like the most potent antibacterial on the planet. But how, in a practical sense, can that actually be used? Someone says to me, right, I've got a bacterial infection, I want to use Cambo. How do I use it? And it's like, I don't know. Just take it in the normal way. But that's the thing. And I guess the answer is, again, we don't know. So we have to wait until more research has been done.
Yeah, and I mean, definitely, like anecdotally speaking, I've seen so many people with chronic and acute infections of some sort use Cambo with great success. And so I've seen the outcome is that it appears to help with these types of infections. We just don't know exactly why. But I live in the tropics. I live in Bali, and I constantly have like some weird, like an infection. Like if you get a cut, you're getting infected because the water you shower in is like, not sterile. And it's the tropics and there's weird pathogens and you get Bali belly and whatever. And I've used Cambo a lot to combat acute infections that I've had here, including COVID. I've self-administered a lot, various times when I either actively had COVID or was fighting it, etc. And so I've seen with my own eyes, it seems to work. Just don't know why. I couldn't really
Yeah.
explain to you. That's all theoretical at this point.
Okay. Okay. So the next question, and this is more follows on from the previous one. Does Cambo modulate the immune system in some way? So why does it help people with autoimmune conditions? So this wouldn't be, I've got a weak immune system, I get sick all the time. I do Cambo and now I don't get sick. This is, my immune system is attacking my body. I've got eczema, dermatitis, or something like this, but Cambo. So it seems like Cambo almost, it normalizes it. If it's underactive, it will bring it up. And if it's overactive, it brings it down.
Yeah, I think it restores some immune intelligence, and does modulate it. Some of the peptides, like Sauvagine is an example of a peptide that interacts with the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, which is really important for initiating the stress response and also the downstream secretion of like steroid type um, hormones like cortisol and the glucocorticoids and adrenocorphin and stuff like that. And those things actually act as, they're steroids. So, when you go to the doctor and you're having some immune response, you get like stung by a bee, or a lot of people that have autoimmune conditions, they're often prescribed these artificial steroids, but actually we create steroids in our body like stress hormones. And so through modulating the release of these endogenous steroids, it can dramatically disrupt these inflammatory pathways that have just been like stuck on the gas pedal for many years, and get people just kind of unstuck from these old biological patterns that have just gone rampant and gone out of control in their bodies.
Okay. Okay. And something I describe to people when I'm trying to explain how Cambo is, I say to people, as an example, when you get flu, it's the symptoms of the flu. It's not caused by the flu virus. So the fever, vomiting, diarrhea that you can get with flu is not caused by the virus. It's the body initiating these processes in order to heal. So it heats up the body to kill the virus and the vomiting and what have you. And when you do Cambo, essentially all Cambo is doing is it's pushing those buttons inside the body and the brain to initiate the healing process. So it's a way of going through the healing process that you would get when you're sick with flu without actually getting flu. And essentially what Cambo is just a short and intense flu. Is that accurate?
That's certainly one way to describe it. That's easy for people to understand. But yeah, you're right about as far as these peptides are just like hitting these buttons, and it's not necessarily that you're vomiting or that you're sick because this thing is hurting you. It's more that it's hacking the software that makes all these biological functions happen. And in that process, there's a lot of regulation and recentering that goes on in your chemistry. And then definitely, as you're probably familiar, there's a lot of times die-off symptoms or these like achy sensations, or people feel fatigued after. And
Yeah.
that is definitely a similar response that you see with when people have like the flu or some sort of infection, where the immune response, the increased like macrophage immune cells that are like going out there and trying to like clean up all the debris of these dead organisms that have basically been slaughtered by the Cambo experience. The body has this increase in inflammatory cytokine molecules that causes these achy sensations or this flu-like sensation. but yeah, I mean, it's sort of just a byproduct of initiating the body's own healing response, just as you said.
Right, right, okay. Okay, next question. So you're probably aware that the method that I use when I do Cambo is it's closer to the Sapo style of Cambo. So I used to do it the way that everybody does it, the Brazilian way. I would drink the 2 liters of water at the beginning and, you know, go through the process, and it was always brutal. I hated it. And then I discovered you can actually do Cambo without drinking water at the beginning, and it's completely different. And for me now, when I do Cambo, it's really not that unpleasant most of the time when I do it. And I still don't understand why, having done it both ways, why people still drink water at the beginning. Why do the Brazilian tribes do it this way? Do they just not know that there's another way to do it and that there's a more pleasant way to do it? Is there any benefit to drinking water at the beginning of the process as opposed to drinking it when you're ready to purge? Because for me, there's no, I still get the same purge. I just don't suffer so much with drinking the water at the beginning.
Yeah, so there's a lot of controversy and differing opinions about what place water drinking has in administering this medicine. And originally I did my training with the IAKP, and they are notorious for teaching people to drink 2 liters of water before their session. And I have done things like that for many years, but I'm starting to move away from that because the risks of drinking that much water, I think, outweigh the benefits. I do think there are some benefits to having some water, and so I'm kind of personally starting to be more in the middle of the road, where I'm experimenting with having people drink about 1 liter or 750 milliliters beforehand. I do think that because the peptides cause the secretion of gastric juices into the gut, such as bile and acid and things like that, the caustic nature of those juices can be quite acidic and damaging and irritating to the tissue, especially to the esophagus when it's coming out. And so I think the water can help dilute the acidity of those juices and prevent some of the almost like heartburn effects, where the delicate tissue is kind of burned on in the process of coming up. Um, but I could also make a case for not diluting it with water, so that if it moves down through the gut, it's killing bacteria and sort of disrupting bacterial communities as well. So jury's still out for me on which method I'll end up sort of settling on. I'm in the process of experimenting with less water. And I think at the end of the day, I think as long as you are avoiding hyponatremia and following certain water protocols to make sure that you're not going above a certain quantity of water, and that people aren't fasting or depriving themselves of electrolytes or getting into that territory where they can have these electrolyte deficiencies and get into real trouble, then I think it's sort of just up to people which method they want to serve, which one they want to participate in, as long as it's within the confines of safe practices with water. I think the variety of different styles is important so that people can choose a practitioner style that resonates with them.
Sure, yeah. So just to be clear though, when I said we do it closer to the Sapo, it's not that we don't drink any water at all. So we don't do it completely dry, but you drink the water when you're ready to purge. So you still I still drink. I still like to get the purge. But I feel the water at the beginning for me makes no difference. I just suffer more. I just feel more unpleasant as I'm going through the process. And when I drink it, when I feel nauseous, usually around 15 minutes, I start to feel nauseous. Then I start drinking water. Then I get really nauseous, and then it comes up. And for me, there's no difference in terms of the benefits, except one way is a lot more pleasant, and the other way for me was I personally would never drink water. Never drink like over a liter at the beginning. It just for me doesn't serve any purpose. What was I going to say? One other thing. Yes. So another thing that I found when you do Cambo dry, it allows you to feel what's really going on with the process. When I used to do it with water, because I'd feel so sick all the way through, I'm suffering so much. I'm just trying to get through this thing. I just want to get it over with. When I do it dry, I actually meditate in the process, and I actually enjoy it. I sit there and I close my eyes and I feel what's going on inside the body. And because I'm empty, I can actually feel what's going on. And usually what will happen for me is some things will start coming up. People, events in the past, scenarios, things come up into my mind, and usually there's some kind of emotional charge, like a negative emotional charge, that needs to be processed. And then that I sit in that unpleasant negative feeling, it processes, and then I purge. So it almost works for me more like another type, more like a psychedelic medicine, even though it's not a psychedelic in that respect. And I found that when I would drink the water at the beginning, that never happened. It's just much more a physical, unpleasant process I'm going through. And when I do it this way without water, it becomes something completely different and much more, it feels more, I don't know the right word, spiritual experience I get when I do it. And actually, the way that I like to do it, although I don't advise clients to do this, I tell clients to drink electrolyte drink like an hour before the treatment. We advise people to drink electrolytes. I actually like to do it as dry as possible. So I wake up in the morning, I don't sip any water. I want to be completely dry, and I do it dry as can be. And the drier I am, I find the more spiritual it feels, so the more connection I feel to the medicine. But as I said, I don't advise, this isn't something I'd advise other people to do. I always make sure people have some liquids, whether it's electrolytes or whatever, beforehand, but just not to drink 2 liters just before it goes on. It's not necessary. And just following on from that, when it's time to drink the water towards the end of the process, you can drink maybe half a liter at a time, half a liter to 3/4 of a liter, and then you purge. And then when you're dry, you drink another half a liter, and then you purge. And you keep repeating this process of drinking small amounts and purging, rather than drinking a huge amount in one go.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Oh,
I think it's part of the importance of trying different things, because then we can share things and explore together, and then
yeah.
arrive at hopefully just more safe and standardized practice that's based off of experience and understanding of what actually works the best.
Mm,
And yeah, I find that really interesting. I've definitely been a big fan of microdosing lately, which I do dry. And that's basically where you're using a non-purgative dose, and keeping it below that purgative threshold, and not drinking the water, because you're not trying to like get anything out. You're just trying to be present to experience the sensations of the medicine, or even the essence of it. And have a mindful moments where you can connect to yourself, your body, and the frog, without being slammed into the ground and completely overwhelmed by the task of surviving the
mm,
experience. So definitely that style that you're describing resonates with me a lot. And I just think it's great that we have the freedom to try
mm.
different things, because dogma can be very dangerous if we don't question the things that we've been taught or have learned, and explore the idea of maybe something else could be different or better, or more appropriate in another context.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. And I was one that was clinging to that dogma. That's the way I always did it. I never questioned it. And then I heard about one of my practitioners had read some of Peter Gorman's work, and he's a Sapo guy, so he does it completely dry.
Mhm.
And one time we were on a retreat. I was with some of my practitioners, and I said, "Why don't we just try it? Let's just try it dry." And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't intend to drink any water. I was going to do it completely dry, but we had water there. We had jugs of water just ready in case. And as soon as I started going through the process in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, this is fantastic. This is like so much more pleasant to go through. But then I got towards the end, and I felt nauseous, and I wanted to purge, and I was like, nothing, there's nothing there. So I reached to the water, I started drinking the water, and then it all came. And then in that moment, that was when for me, in my opinion, I was like, okay, this seems to be the best way to do it. It's like a hybrid of the two methods.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I totally agree. I think there's, and that's, that's one way. I'm sure there's other ways it can be done, and it's great that we have the opportunity to experiment like this. But yeah, again, I'm just very interested as to why, some of the, say, for example, like Brazilian tribes, they just stick to doing it that way. Is it just because it passes down in the lineage?
Yeah,
And
I mean, I'm not even sure that it's necessarily in their lineage. I mean, different tribes do different things, and I think people have this idea that the tribe does it this way, or there's this like blanket traditional application. And what I've seen, even just going into Iquitos and working with different Matse communities in the same area, they still have evolved largely different methods of working with this medicine. And so I think it's a bit of a myth that there's like this like standardized way of this is how they've done it their whole existence. And they're like any other community of people, like things change and things do evolve over time. And so I don't know if you're referring to like the Huni Kuni, or if there's a specific Brazilian tribe that to do the water consumption, but that could be something that they developed in the last 20 years because white people started asking them to do Cambo, and maybe
so,
they didn't
okay,
use water before that. I don't know.
okay,
I'm not an expert on each tradition with each tribe. I'm still learning, about sort of the historical indigenous practices, but um,
okay, yeah, no,
yeah,
fair
I
enough.
don't know why. I don't know why.
Mm.
I imagine they didn't have access to clean water for most of their historical existence. So I imagine this is a more recent thing that they've started doing.
Okay, so yeah, it's like you said, not a standardized thing. And I mean, I haven't been there, so I'm only going on what I've read. And it was my understanding that the sort of Brazilian way to do it is the way where you drink the water at the beginning, and then the Sapo way is how the Matsays and some of the Peruvian tribes do it. But that could be completely wrong, I suppose.
Yeah, and we don't even really know who the first tribes were to be using this medicine. Like the Matses were not the first; they learned from another tribe. So it's not clear how long uh, people have been using this medicine. It's not clear who was the first and who shared it with whom. And so naturally, it has evolved and segmented and turned into its own thing for each community.
Okay. Okay. Okay, next question. Can you overdose on Cambo, or is there a threshold amount that once crossed will not produce any more effects? So, in other words, if you just kept adding more and more and more points, not that I'm advising to people to do that, or I would ever do it, just out of interest, is there a cap to how strong it can be, or can it get stronger and stronger and stronger?
Great question.
Mm.
Um, I certainly think it's probably not worth finding out because
No,
I
absolutely
think
not.
it would endanger people.
Mm.
It'd be an interesting study to do on mice, perhaps. Not that their lives aren't valuable too, but
Yeah, yeah.
we gotta learn somewhere. Um, Theoretically speaking, certain peptides, I imagine you would reach a saturation level where there are no more receptors available to be bound to.
Right.
But this threshold could be very different for different peptides, and it could also be very different in different individuals. So, um, like I might have a different quantity of certain opioid receptors than somebody else would, and therefore my sensitivity or my threshold level might be different. Also, the health of my cardiovascular system might be different than a 70-year-old man who's been smoking his whole life. And so if your heart is pumping like really hard, and you're not in the health to be able to adapt or tolerate that, then perhaps it could be considered fatal or uh, toxic or like an overdose at that point. So it's pretty relative. Um, And as with pretty much all of these questions, I'm just going to
Mm,
repeat myself and say,
yeah.
I don't know. It would be
Okay.
great to find out what the LD50 is, which LD50 is like basically what's the dosage it takes to kill half of the population of mice that it's administered to. Um, so it'd be nice to know what the LD50 is with Cambo, not just individual peptides that are synthesized and found in Cambo, but actual complex multi-peptide substance administered through the skin to mice, and see how many of them are potentially dying at a certain dose, and then we could start to have an idea of if this would be translatable to humans, and if this is in a range that is well below the threshold that most people are receiving dosage wise.
Okay. Okay. Because yeah, I know I've seen pictures of you like indigenous guys, especially when they do it on their chest. And I've personally never done it on my chest, but I know people that have, you know, and it's the strongest place you can do it. And you know, I've seen pictures of guys with like, you know, God knows how many points on their chest, and I'm just thinking that looks really, really, you know, strong. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just wondered what happened if you just put, I don't know, something crazy like 50 points on your chest, what would happen? But again,
Yeah,
not that
might
I
not
would,
be a
not
good
that I ever
idea.
would do that. Yeah, not that I would ever do that. I can't imagine. I mean, even even 10 points on the chest, I've seen someone do that and they had to take it off after 5 minutes because it was too much.
Yeah. And some tribes will insist that you never put it on the chest. So
Mm,
again, there's like completely different perspective of indigenous communities. And people love to say that it's all one way and that there's traditional, non-traditional, but it's not that simple. And I personally put points on people's chests, but I don't put a lot because I do think it can get extremely strong when you're
mm,
slapping five, or more points on somebody. I mean, even one
yeah,
sometimes is strong, but every risk is related to dosage, I believe. So I personally have a very conservative dosing approach, and that allows me
yeah,
to be able to put points on different parts of the body, and
mm,
seems to work.
yeah, yeah. Interesting point regarding dosage. What I've found is that when I used to treat people with water at the beginning, I would always lean towards a very progressive approach to applying the Cambo, just because it hits you so hard when you've got 2 liters of water in you, it comes on like this hammer blow. And since I've switched to the method with starting without water, I find that because it comes on much more gently. Um, I'm less concerned with applying it slowly. I still we apply, you know, a point to start and see how the person reacts, but I find that it's much less traumatic for the person when they go through it. So um, I'm not sure what the right word is. Not less concerned. That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. It's like I find that people can take the medicine. Um, they're more comfortable. They're more comfortable taking the medicine without water than when they are. That's what I found, because it comes on more gently. They have more time to kind of feel what's happening and appreciate what's happening, rather than it hitting them just like super hard. And I would never, I wouldn't give somebody, 5 points, just 5 points off the bat, when they've drunk the water at the beginning. But with the when they haven't drunk water at the beginning, I'd be much more comfortable doing that because I know the process is going to be more gentle.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and you could certainly argue that there may be more benefits to having more of the peptides in circulation.
Mm,
Not to discount the effectiveness of using very small or even micro doses, but
mm,
for example, I have a client that I work with who is HIV positive, and she's been getting regular blood tests of her viral load, and it seems like when she does the full purgative sessions where we're doing like more than 3 points, her viral load is getting brought down substantially, and then the microdoses seem to keep it from getting higher, but don't
mm,
necessarily take it down. So there perhaps is a dose dependent benefit. And so what you're describing is if people are able to get more of the peptides in circulation, so like a larger dose without it slamming them and putting them at risk or being like so much more uncomfortable, then it might actually be helping them get more benefit.
Yeah, yeah. What I found is you stay in the heat stage for longer. So when I used to do it with water, I'd get the heat, and then within about a minute, I'd start feeling really, really sick. When you do it without water, the heat stage is massively elongated. For me, the first sort of 10, 15 minutes, I'm just resting in the heat flushing, and then that may or may not switch to nausea. And one other benefit I found of this method is sometimes there isn't any nausea at all. There's no nausea, and I'll go through the process, feel not that bad, think, okay, this is not, I haven't taken enough Cambo here. I drink the water at 20 minutes and then I purge all the bile without any nausea at all. And that does happen every now and then with clients as well. Okay, next question. Hypothetically, is Cambo safe to do every day for the rest of your life?
I personally wouldn't. I do know that when people are using Cambo kind of excessively, one I've heard of several cases and seen cases where people start to move towards like manic or hypomanic or even psychotic behavior.
Really? Okay.
And part of that could be because the Cambo is like up regulating dopamine transmission, and a lot of like dopamine activity in the brain is correlated with states of psychosis, which is why with drugs that affect dopamine, like cocaine or methamphetamine, we can see drug-induced psychosis. So I do think that that is a risk, that your grip on reality can start to get a little bit loose. And I've definitely seen that with people that are kind of using it all the time. They
Really?
start getting
Okay.
a little crazy. Also, I've seen in myself and also others that if you're using Cambo really frequently and your immune system is getting like ramped up, ramped up, ramped up, I've seen people, including myself, develop new allergies to things, including
Uh,
food allergies. So I had never had a nut allergy, but my immune system was getting like stronger and stronger from the Cambo, which is great because I was never getting sick. I was feeling awesome. A lot of my chronic infections, like with Lyme disease and stuff, were getting cleared. However, I started developing these immune responses to certain foods like nuts and quinoa and sesame and stuff like that. And it seemed related to the frequency that I was using Cambo, um, in conjunction with other very immune boosting like supplements and probiotics and products like that. But I do think that too much of a good thing is possible. And so, the difference between medicine and poison is dosage and
mm,
frequency as well. So I think like everything in life, it's about balance, and take what you need but no more, because you might push yourself into a hyper vigilant immune kind of agitated or amped up person.
right. Okay. And by the way, I wasn't suggesting that anybody should do that. I was just interested. It was just interested that as I said, hypothetically, if you were to just say do Cambo every day, would that be a problem? And what you're saying is yes, it would, and that actually it's too much, and it could actually affect your brain chemistry in a negative way, which I didn't
Yeah.
know. So that's good. That's really good to know.
And of course, in short term, it might be different. Like if you are trying to like battle an infection, or maybe you have cancer and you're at risk of dying, and you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna take the risk and blast this as hard as I can for 2 weeks or whatever. So in
Mm,
the short term, sometimes it might make sense to like really hit it hard, but for like weeks and months and years of your life, I think eventually things would go south.
yeah. No, that makes sense. And I don't think there would be you just wouldn't do it. You just wouldn't want to do it
It
that
wouldn't be
often.
very fun.
No,
You'd be like, ah, I
no, no,
hate this
no,
shit again.
no, no. I've gone through periods where I've done it frequently, and I've done retreats where I've done it, like 4 days in a row. But then I don't do it for a long time after that. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, next question. A bile flush. This is interesting. So, why is a bile flush healthy? Now, I know when we get sick, right? I've had food poisoning before, and my body flushed the bile, and I vomited bile, and that happens during a Cambo process. But why is that? And this is from a physical point of view. Obviously, we're talking about panema and energy, and that the bile is the panema. But from a physical standpoint, why is a bile flush healthy?
Yeah, totally. So this is a question that comes up like, is it important for people to purge? Is it actually detoxifying them? And so we actually have this relationship between the bile that's secreted from our pancreas, our gallbladder, and it cycles through the liver and is part of our innate detoxification system in the gut. And so bile is like this super non-polar, so basically like an oily substance that holds fat soluble toxins. And so the body will deposit stuff into the gut in order to be kind of soaked up, excuse me, by the bile and discarded. So some examples of this are heavy metals, including things like copper or even iron. If you have excess amounts of these metals or minerals in the body, you'll actually deposit it in the gut, in the bile. It'll be saturated in that liquid bile, and then will be removed through body, through the
Mm,
digestive tract. But in going through the digestive tract, sort of when you're going the normal direction, which is down,
mm.
um, a lot of the bile does get reabsorbed, and so it's a little bit inefficient because in that process the toxins also get reabsorbed. So when you actually vomit bile, old bile that has been saturated with different toxins like metals or non-polar solvents, industrial toxins from plastics or shampoos or whatever, wherever they come from, um, they kind of get saturated in the bile, and then you vomit the bile, and it forces your body to regenerate fresh supply of bile that is now free of toxins. So that is one of the mechanisms that Kambo actually is a detoxification aid, is through getting rid of and regenerating fresh supply of bile.
I see. I see. So also, I know bile is what the body uses to break down fat as well. So when we eat food, the body needs to break down the fat. It releases bile into the digestive system, and then it breaks down the fat, and the fat can be absorbed. So, but also, you're saying that obviously the liver processes everything. It's like the most important organ we have. It processes everything, and then toxins that are in the liver, when the liver's making the bile, the toxins go into the bile. Is that right? And they sit in the gallbladder, these toxins in the bile.
Yeah, so the toxins are like, yeah, they're in the bile, and then the bile is being filtered through the liver, where the liver pulls out like things that it, doesn't think the body should be. I mean, to be honest, I'm not an expert at the whole
Yeah, 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 yeah,
hepatocycling of it. I'm
yeah.
not a doctor. I'm not like a, you know, um, I haven't, I don't have a physiology degree or anything like
Mm,
that. So my understanding is rough, but
mm.
yeah, there's some relationship between the liver and the digestive tract and the bile, and the shuttling out of toxins that the body has deemed inappropriate for storing in the liver.
Okay, okay, yeah, no, that's cool. Makes it clear. Um, okay, next, if you could, so the benefits of Cambo, but from a science perspective. So the first one we spoke about was the bile flush and why that's healthy. But some of the other benefits that we get from Cambo, if you could just touch on some of those, and but from the mechanism of how they occur.
Yeah, so definitely like zooming out, you see a lot of improvement in people's moods, their energy levels, especially if they have chronic fatigue, pain or chronic pain, um, infections and early symptoms of infections, addictive patterning, and also like psychological distress, PTSD, things like that. And I think there's just a whole bunch of things happening. Like I said, there's perhaps direct and indirect effects influencing the immune function, which can help clear infections. There is an increase in vagal nerve tone and nervous system health, um, through perhaps some of the opioid peptides or Sauvagine, which affects the stress response. There's anti-inflammatory properties, also perhaps from the steroid secretion from Sauvagine and the HPA axis. Um, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on
Yeah.
that we still got to figure out. But this is all just theoretical, and all I know is what I see with my clients, and then what we know on a molecular level with these individual peptides, and then you try your best to extrapolate and create hypotheses about how something is turning into something else. um, but it's quite complex, and like whole systemic modulation, I would say, is like, I think there's all these systems and all these peptides working together to monitor and correct chemical imbalances and bring the body back into chemical homeostasis.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it's one of those things where we just don't know exactly how it's doing it, but it seems to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Next question: the shaking that some people get during and after the process. Sometimes people get very profound shakes. Now, is this just due to blood pressure, and often they feel cold after, or is there something else going on?
So I know that with some of the peptides, like the phytolautorins, in rats, they have observed that their body temperature will drop. So it's possible that like there's something going on with the thermoregulation, and their body is actually getting cold and shivering. It seems to happen towards the end of the experience when
Mhm.
the cambo is kind of letting off. Um, Perhaps it's also a somatic thing with the nervous system, releasing energy, whatever that means on a mechanistic level. I don't really know. Um, Another great mystery of why things happen when we do this crazy frog stuff.
Yeah, that's something else I'd heard, was that it's like a trauma release, or there's an energetic release with this tremoring. But again, so no one knows. Um, Color of the purges. This is one I get asked about a lot. Sometimes we see different colors, not only yellow and green. I've seen blue, like turquoise blue, pink, red, brown, and I've seen black as well. And I don't have an answer for people when they ask me what the different colors mean. And I wondered if you
Yeah.
do.
So some of the theories I have, the one that has the strongest evidence. So when you see this turquoise or even green, because if you think about it, green might just be turquoise purge that was like particularly dark yellow. um so that, I think, is copper toxicity. So I
Mm,
had a client who is an analytical chemist, and he had very blue purge, and I said, hey, I think that you might have some excess copper in your system. So he went and tested that sample in a buddy's lab or something, and there was pretty high levels of copper detected in it. And it turned out that his fridge water had high levels of copper in it, and it was
really?
actually there was like a residue of this like blue turquoise crust in the water spout when he pulled it apart. So it seems that that's a high likelihood that the blue turquoise color you see is copper that is being deposited into the gut because there's too much of it. And excess copper is associated with autoimmunity and psychosis and
Wow.
all sorts of mental health issues, and um, PMS and like all sorts of different like imbalances in people. Um, the red and the black, I think, could potentially be blood. You know, people do
Mhm.
sometimes pop little capillaries through the purging process. If
Yeah.
it's red, it means that the capillary is sort of fresh and the blood is fresh. If
Mm.
you're seeing dark, sometimes I think that could indicate that there's old dried blood, perhaps
Mm.
from an ulcer or some sort of compromised area in the intestine where there's actually blood or a sore.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you know, I don't really try to make up like, oh, green means you're releasing anger.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
No, I know.
I don't know. So I kind of stick to what I think is practical to explain on a scientific level. But most of the time, people's purge is yellow. It's like the
Yeah.
most popular color, and sometimes you see the variations. And I think it could just be a function of if they have metals in the gut, if how saturated their bile might be with like other junk from over the years that
Mm.
maybe has a color to it.
Okay. Okay. And when somebody's going through a Cambo process, something I read was that the organs, and this was just like organs, release toxins. Does that happen, or is it just the bile that's being flushed, or are other organs ones that are capable of releasing toxins? Are other organs releasing toxins as well?
Yeah, I think it's an oversimplification from people that don't understand what it even means to detox,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you also have to define what you mean by detoxification. So, you know, removing bile is one way you can detoxify, but also there's minute like cellular processes that are detoxifying cells from metabolic byproducts that cause damage. And for example, like dopamine actually, when it gets metabolized into something called dopachrome, is considered a metabolic toxic byproduct. And so there's all these things in the body that can be considered toxic within a certain range, right? And so again, we don't know. We don't know what's going on really on a
Mm.
cellular level with these peptides. I feel that there likely is some heavy metal detoxification enhancement happening. I don't know exactly how or why. That could be explicitly through the bile. It could be through these more sophisticated, minute cellular detoxification pathways that I don't understand enough about. And frankly, nobody else does in regards to this medicine.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I know Camo definitely causes glands to secrete. So the various glands around the body will start to secrete. I know it's like the gastric juices, and also I've even had people that purged. It sounds horrible. They purged out of their eye, where you know, like
Hmm.
this gunk, this yellow gunk, that starts coming out of their eye, like when you get sort of sleep in your eye, you know, in the morning. They
Yeah.
start to the tear ducts start to secrete. So that does make me think that, you know, and again, I'm not a doctor or an expert on the human body, but maybe there's glands, different glands around the body, and they all start secreting at the same time, which would also be, which would be a detoxification process.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, you see the mucus production, and mucus production is a mechanism of mitigating toxins getting into the body. So, you know, when you're eating spicy food and you start getting the runny nose, the reason that is because there's molecules called lectins in the like capsaicin is a lectin, and the body can neutralize lectins by producing carbohydrate molecules that bind the lectin, and your mucus is full of these carbohydrate molecules that neutralize it. So yeah, mucus is an example of how the body might try to be neutralizing or mitigating a toxic substance, but it's less about, I think, pulling stuff out and more about stopping it from coming in. It's specific to mucus. But
Right.
yeah, like you said, there's tons of stuff going on, and all the organs are like going ape shit, and they're all like ah, and doing weird stuff all at once, just freaking
Mm,
out that this weird this weird
mm,
substance has entered the situation, and they're just kind of like pressing all the levers and all the buttons and just trying to like get the stuff out.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we definitely just we need to have more research where we can actually find out for sure what's going on with it with these things with when somebody goes through a Cambo process. Um, that's all the questions. Caitlin, thank you so much. That was amazing. I've learned a lot, and it's a shame that a lot of the answers were this is what I think, but we just don't know. So we really do need more research done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry that so often I'm just like, I don't know, but I would be lying if I said that I knew, and I think it's really important that we're honest about what
Mm,
we know and what we don't know. Otherwise, we just make shit up, and there's misinformation, and we endanger people, and we change the public's opinion about what Cambo is when we don't actually have reputable facts to support.
yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. Oh yeah, as again, thank you so much. It was amazing, and I have learned a lot. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about you, or we'll put some links in under this video for you. But where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a couple different websites depending on who you are and how you want to connect. So my private Cambo practice is medicinefrogcambo.com. And then if you're a Cambo practitioner and you're looking for specialty training for approaching your clients that do have Lyme disease or other autoimmune related diseases, I teach specialty courses online for existing practitioners. I also have microdosing course that's for practitioners and non-practitioners. So those that are wishing to deepen their relationship by self-administering these very small doses. Um, and then I have a site called cambofinder.com. So if you're looking for practitioner in your area, you can filter by different certifications, location, experience level, whether they offer groups, privates, etc. So I got a lot of stuff brewing, but you can reach out to me through any of those websites. So just shoot me a message, shoot me an email, and connect if you feel inspired.
Great. Okay, so yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I can't wait to watch it back. There's a lot I need to go back and listen to and sort of and digest. And yeah, I think our viewers will really enjoy it, and we'd love to have you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John, for taking the time and inviting me to chat. And yeah, look forward from hearing from you again.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. See you later.